This week, Cryptotrader comes to you from Toronto, the birthplace of Ethereum and a big crypto hub. On a week where global stock markets have taken a hit, there's a big threat of currency wars. Let's go find out what this all means for crypto right here at the Futurist Conference.
Cryptotrader is proudly brought to you by eToro. Discover a simpler way to trade and invest in cryptocurrencies and more.
Welcome to Toronto Futurist Conference, the conference showcasing the much-heralded Toronto blockchain and crypto scene, the site of much building and development since the early days of blockchain. There are big names here, like Vitalik.
It's not just blockchains as money.
Anthony Diario.
And it was really made me reset and think about why and the why of what I'm doing.
Brock.
Toronto.
And the broader blockchain community. Here's Vitalik.
It's blockchains as a platform for designing and implementing and executing the logic of new kinds of institutions.
And interestingly, the conference and attendees are using crypto for everything, from payments to produce and even prizes. And of course, building on the blockchain, like Brock and EOS.
So today I want to talk about the future of governance. This blockchain revolution raises age-old questions, 10,000-year-old questions, questions that have been being asked for millennia, which is, how do we govern?
Before we go further, let's take a look at the big macro questions facing crypto today. Just as recessionary indicators started blinking with an inverted bond yield curve for the first time since 2007. Is the crypto market correlated or uncorrelated to the global stock markets? Is crypto really that hedge that we've been talking about? From July 28 to August 6, we saw a $3,000 rise, from a low of $9,200 to just above $12,200. All that amid the escalated trade war tensions between the US and China, with China devaluing their currency. We then traded flat until August 10th, when we saw a big drop from 11,800 right down to 9,700, and then a hard bounce back to above 10,000. Then things got really tricky. Just as I sat down with Alex Mashinsky, the founder of Celsius, I got notification about a huge dip in the stock market. And as I look at my phone, the Dow Jones is trading 3% down on the day. Bitcoin's also having a terrible day. Alex, is this the global meltdown that everyone's been talking about? Is this the perfect storm? And is Bitcoin going to emerge successful here?
So when we last spoke at Consensus, Bitcoin was actually surging while all the other currency and everything else was going down. It was proving itself as a non-correlated asset. Right now, there's so much fear that it is not behaving the way it's supposed to. It's not proving that it's a non-correlating asset, right? So part of it was because we pumped so much on the Facebook news, and now we're going back to that median. I think I mentioned on your show 86 to 8,900 several times. I think that's where we're going to see support. We're going to retest that, and we're going to get to new highs. But if there is a currency war, this is the big Armageddon, right? Because if you're looking at the history of stable coins or
currencies,
stable currencies, right, and you look at the Roman Empire that's been the longest, almost 2,000 years, the gold coin was the world standard for a very long time. The Portugal, Spain, France, England, right, the Dutch, and then the United States, almost all of them were between 95 to 105 years. So the dollar, depending where you start counting, is between 75 and 95 years. So we're at the end of the cycle. So Bitcoin needs to emerge as a non-correlated asset. And if it does, everybody's going to try to park their assets in that non-correlated assets, gold and Bitcoin, and not ore. And we will see another surge to new highs.
So you said two very interesting things. I think the one thing is you said that Bitcoin doesn't or hasn't displayed the signs that it's a not correlated asset. But if you zoom out and you say, let's not look at today or the last 2 days, but let's look at the last 3 months, then certainly Bitcoin has showed those qualities. So maybe a little bit of...
Well, let's zoom 11 years back, right? So if you look at 11 years, Bitcoin is still the best performing asset class anywhere, compared to any asset, compared to any stock, any bond, any currency. So it is performing overall. It just needs to perform when the VIX jumps. When you see the VIX jumps 10, 20, 30 points, that's when it's being tested. It's not being tested on a daily basis when things are moving in a very small increments.
And now when you look at the trade war with China, and it's a trade war which is overlaid with a currency war because they're devaluing, they keep devaluing their currency. Doesn't this make the perfect storm for people to buy a non-political asset? Bitcoin is a non-political asset, for lack of a better word.
Right, so that's already happening in China. The Chinese miner companies that are buying Chinese mining equipment in yuan, they're buying electricity in yuan, right? They're employing people in yuan. They're producing Bitcoin and they're selling it for dollars. So all they're doing is exporting Bitcoins out of China, right? So there are billions of dollars leaving China. The reason the largest mining operations are in China is not because they want to do a 51% attack. It's because they need to take as many dollars out as possible, and devaluing the currency is going to accelerate that.
Okay, now if we look at cryptocurrencies, there's a clear separation of Bitcoin and everyone else. What happens to the supercomputing networks? What happens to the utility token market? Do you think that run is now overdue?
Well, again, it's a seesaw, right? So it's a closed universe, and when there is risk, people want to take less risk. The way you take less risk inside our community is sell alts and buy Bitcoin, right? So are we seeing a lot of influx of new dollars into the community? Not really, because otherwise Bitcoin prices and other prices would be going up dramatically. What we need is, again, new entrants. We need more new people to understand that this is a non-correlated asset. And conferences like this, events that we're going to every week, every month, are the places where we educate people for them to understand that parking your money in euros or in dollars or in yen is not going to save you.
But Alex, is that enough? I mean, we walk around here, and I think you commented earlier that, and it kind of sounds to me like we're speaking to ourselves. So we go to these conferences, we speak to ourselves. It's the same community that goes to conferences every single time. What do we do to get beyond that and to get more people to really believe in buying this asset? And when I say this asset, I don't only mean Bitcoin. I mean the supercomputing networks.
Yes, I agree with you. So look, we have to continue telling the story. And we also need to solve the complexity. I mean, all the people who are saying, not my keys, not your Bitcoin, you need to understand that 99% of the population out there is not comfortable with that.
We don't want to hold keys. We just want to press buy and
I
hold.
want a non-correlated asset. How are you going to make it easy for me to buy it? The SEC is not allowing me to buy it. Other regulators are not allowing me to buy it through the ETFs. What are the entry points? And that's part of what Celsius is trying to do. A lot of other great companies are trying to create that onboarding, create a bridge between the
Make
world
it easy.
and exactly.
Make it easy.
But the new billion people who are going to join us are probably not going to want to hold their keys.
So Alex, I don't want to give you a punt on the show. I promise that I'm not going to push specific companies, but I did notice that Celsius is now holding over 20,000 Bitcoin.
Yes, we just crossed 20,000. We have a total of 350 million in AUM. About 200 million of that is in Bitcoin. We're adding about $2 million dollars a day right now. 2/3 of that is Bitcoin. And we're seeing more and more first-time comers who are either buying stable coins or Bitcoin. So we are seeing that adoption. And again, part of it is also why the Cell token is up so much, because all these people also want to hold some Cell token and get exposure to the upside. So,
Welcome back to Toronto, a futurist city, and of course the perfect venue for a futurist conference. Just take a look around, you'll see why. So here we are with the conference organizer right here in Toronto. Beautiful view, amazing conference. And what's the community like here? I mean, we know Ethereum came out of Toronto, but what else is happening in Toronto?
Lots of really amazing projects come out of Toronto, a lot of projects that are buzzing, and a lot of individuals that have kind of been traveling around the world working on other projects. So Polymath is a big one, Shift, and dozens of others. So.
And Aeon's also out of Toronto.
Yeah, Rock Fierce here, Vitalik came out and did a big keynote. Anthony Diorio came and did a big keynote fireside. So we bring a lot of big names here.
But one thing that I've noticed is that you can actually use crypto at this conference,
Yeah.
which is quite unique. Like usually you go to conferences that only accept US dollars. You can't use Bitcoin or crypto.
Yeah.
Here, this whole ecosystem is actually using crypto. Tell us a little bit about the thinking.
Definitely. I think, my belief is if we want to bring blockchain and cryptocurrency to the world, we got to do it at an event first. And we got to do it at our own events. It's almost our own little world here. We have everything that we need to create our own little planet and our own little world. And so we bring it all on site. So when you purchase your tickets online, you can use cryptocurrency, and they're smart tickets, so they're on the blockchain. We have POS systems all on site with CycleBit that you can accept Bitcoin and Ethereum. We have about 10 companies doing airdrops. All the food trucks enabled with a company called Buns. So they airdrop you bits to use it at the food trucks, and just tons of really great ways to use it on site to make it really tangible in real life for people.
Okay, now hold on. Yesterday when I went to get a fruit, I got a pear.
Yeah.
And there was a little barcode there. Or like,
Yeah.
What is that?
So what we did with that is we worked with a company called Herc, and what we did is use their supply chain protocol to put all of our produce on the blockchain for the conference.
So we know exactly where the pear came from and when it was picked and everything on the blockchain.
Where it was, the location of it, the size of it. You can see photos of it throughout it.
Well, on that note, I'm going to go grab some fruit.
Definitely.
Who holds more power? Is it the state or is it the corporations? Alex, is it the state or is it the corporations?
It depends on the circumstances. Mark Andreessen is famous for saying at the beginning of the dot-com boom that in a battle between a bear and a crocodile, victory depends on terrain. And so it depends on what you're talking about. And you left out the third player in this whole battle about the clash of the titans, which is states versus corporations versus the people, because people can also make their own currencies. And right now, certain countries, like the United States, have more power than any corporation. But then they fall apart very quickly, and the more powerful cryptocurrencies have more power than all but a tiny fraction of the states. But the real power in the end is with the people.
So let's talk about the shift from the state to the corporation. How does that actually happen? How does that play out?
Sure. Well, there's a professor in London, Strange, Dr. Strange, actually the real name, who talks about the retreat of the state. And so as corporations get better and better, and they've always been good at bribing politicians, and politicians are always happy to receive bribes, which are called campaign contributions, then the state is happy to make way for corporations. And so there's nothing magical about the state's ability to offer the currency. And Hayek, the great economist, talked about the denationalization of currency and said, blessed will be that day when the government gets out of the way. And because the history of government involvement is a history of currency debasement and of fraud and of excess. And so when we talk about cryptocurrency, I call Bitcoin the atomic clock of money.
Let's talk about the shift from state, the shift of power from state to corporation. How does that happen, and how do cryptocurrencies fit into all of this?
Sure, you have three big factors. There's the retreat of the state. So for instance, most of the private space is going to be done in this century by billionaires like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and others still to come, Richard Branson. You have the fact that corporations can fill in every small niche while it's large, and by the time government thinks, oh, I'd like to be in that business, there's already a marketplace for it. But the third thing is that corporations are going to do what they did in the past, which is issue currencies. So the most valuable company in history, adjusted for inflation, as far as I know, is the Dutch East India Company. At one point, adjusted for inflation, it was worth $7.4 trillion, which is about how much the dot-com boom was, $6 trillion of that in the US. And they issued their own currency. The British East Indies companies also issued its own currency. They had private armies. So corporations are going to issue currencies again. And people are going to tokenize all real estate, all stocks, all bonds. And as soon as you have somebody tokenize US Treasury bonds, then the line will be so blurred between cryptocurrency and government offerings that it won't even be a clear battle.
Now, is Libra coin the first iteration of that? And then we saw Walmart's also talking about some kind of cryptocurrency. Are those the first two big iterations of major corporates with big client bases launching their own currencies?
Well, there are bigger number of people than there are people in the United States. They're bigger than all the people who hold significant US dollars. So right now, people have been able to treat crypto as a pet. Oh, isn't it a cute little tiny adorable cat? Because there are only about 20 to 25 million people with crypto wallets. However, when that gets to over 1 billion people, you suddenly have something that's 3 times the number of people who speak English. And you have right now this number, 888 million people have mobile money. They don't need bank accounts because they have all their money on their phone. Now, that's hidden from the West because half of those people are in Africa. And they're all spread out just around the world. Most of the rest are in China. But wait till you have 5 billion people with mobile phones that do their banking on the phone, and it's safer and more legit to have it in crypto, and all of a sudden governments will go, hey, where did that money go? And the advantage of having the US Treasury bond and the dollar is 20 trillion. It's 20 trillion of free money from the rest of the world for the US to party on, and that's going to go away probably by 2025.
This panel featured Block Tower Capital on where the market is heading, especially with recessionary fears right around the corner.
Thank you very much.
So great panel just off the stage talking about everything to do with crypto, and I really want to catch up with you because we haven't spoken for a while.
Yeah.
I think we're talking about a market collapse. I mean, the bond rates went down today and people are talking about a recession, and there's been a lot of talk on Twitter saying this is it, this is when everyone's going to move to Bitcoin instead of gold. Do you buy that thesis?
I don't buy an ultimate replacement. I buy the fact that people are looking at Bitcoin as a better alternative to gold. So Ray Dalio's recent piece where his eventual conclusion was buy gold, short the market, and a certain other nuanced trades that he likes. Anything that he mentioned that was referencing gold, you could have essentially replaced with Bitcoin.
So do you think that Bitcoin is becoming a substitute for gold, or an alternative to gold? I'm not going to say a substitute because I think it's too small to call it a substitute.
Yeah, well, this is the first time we're actually seeing evidence of a macro market that could indicate it is like gold. So we've seen it track, for example, the yuan quite well. We've seen it track gold reasonably well. We've seen it track the VIX reasonably well. But those relationships have started to break down a little bit now, and so this makes you question, is it actually, is that a market indication or is it a function of liquidity? So for example, Argentina, obviously, it was the second worst equity market performance in history of any market globally. It was down 46%, was that just yesterday? And the transaction volume in Bitcoin was de minimis. And if you speak to people who are familiar with that region, it's not a function of people's views on Bitcoin as being alternative to gold. It's an unawareness of Bitcoin still. So it shows you how early days we still are.
So what is driving the price of Bitcoin up? And the reason why I ask that is because if you look at the rest of the coins aren't moving.
Yeah.
Bitcoin is going up and altcoins are pretty much in a bear market if you look at it. What is it that's driving up Bitcoin but not driving up everything else?
So I think you're seeing a few different things. Accumulation from large funds that were raised, and so you have some of these large $100 million, $300 million VC funds that are accumulating Bitcoin as a reserve along with USD, and they fund their VC investments through that. So you've seen accumulations there. The CME volumes are through the roof, which means those are typically institutions that are trading futures. That could be some direct draw. I do think you're actually seeing quite a few people in the family office space, for example, I speak with quite a bit, who are taking small positions directly in Bitcoin alongside their fund investments. And so I think the adoption of Bitcoin as this other reserve asset, particularly as we get towards the late innings of this macro cycle, it's a pretty attractive alternative to have in the portfolio.
What about the other altcoins? What about the supercomputing networks, the ETHs, the EOS?
We get this question all the time. Why are you guys not, purely Bitcoin right now? Why would I not be purely Bitcoin? Why should I stay in a diversified fund? These are all things that, questions that we hear frequently and we've heard from the start. It's because Bitcoin still hasn't proven out. It's been 10 years. We haven't seen any true faults in the network, but that being said, you still have risk and proof of work. You still have, probably a dozen smart contract protocols. They're all at the base layer. They're all competing for one real use case. And it may be a zero-sum game or there may be specialties within each, but what's the value you put on that? So I think for us, the indication is, yes, listen, you should own Bitcoin outright. And whether that's through, whether that's your fund manager that owns 40% or whether that's you owning passively on the side to an active manager, Bitcoin right now seems like one of the safer bets in the space.
But is this a good time to be buying the altcoins? Because everybody's focusing on Bitcoin. All the money's flowed out of altcoins into Bitcoin. And if you read the tweets and read the comments, everyone's saying, do yourself a favor, get out of the alts and get into Bitcoin.
I think it's an amazing time to be doing deep work on altcoins because they have been forgotten. And there's obviously the major altcoins that everyone looks at and keeps track of and is trying to figure out what's happening within the Ethereum ecosystem or what EOS is going to do with its, its treasure trove of cash, and if that's going to provide any type of market movement. And then you go down the stack, right, to the top 50, and maybe projects that have been, dropped for dead. And reality is the dev team has been on fire and they've been hitting their KPIs, they've been hitting their milestones, and they're just unaware. And that's very interesting from an activism standpoint. You can take an activist position in a name and really push it forward.
So conclusion, as a fund manager, it's probably a good time to start looking at the alts and doing some real work there.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about IOs replacing ICOs. Now, the theory here is that the exchanges, you're buying into an exchange and the due diligence process that the exchange is doing on the project.
Right.
In reality, though, I'm not sure if we're seeing that the exchanges are doing such a good due diligence process. Is this something that may kill the IEO market?
I think so. Again, it reminds me a lot of traditional markets where typically you're going to a Goldman Sachs IPO, you're fairly certain that's a high quality company. It made it through a lot of their diligence process. It made it up to Goldman. It's not being taken public by a third tier bank. And I'm not saying third tier banks don't bring high quality projects to market or IPOs to market, but Binance, I should say this lightly, but is kind of the Goldman Sachs of the IEO.
And this is coming from a guy that was at Goldman Sachs.
Right, I'm not saying, listen, this is apples to oranges, but that being said, you have to be very comfortable in Binance, and I think people have gotten to a point where they're comfortable with Binance to underwrite their underwriting methods. And so you should also look at the project and be comfortable with it, speak with the team, but you also are taking a bet that Binance is doing a great job of screening those for you, which is it's actually a very big step in the industry.
It is a big step. It's bringing us back to the traditional finance world where Goldman was doing all the work and then the investors were comfortable going behind Goldman. Now we're saying that Binance is doing the same work and investors should be comfortable doing it. So we hope. One last question, equity and investing in young VC type plays in the space. How's that market?
The market's great. There's a lot of talented teams. As always, with I would say in any space at this point in the global credit cycle, there is a ton of capital all chasing deal flow. So I think this is why being part of the ecosystem is so important. It's knowing teams in depth and then understanding if one of the greatest engineers of a particular project spins off, you immediately connect with them. Say, what are you working on next? This is where deal sourcing, your grassroots network. This is where this all comes to play. And also your connectivity to larger venture firms.
Is that market hot? Is there a lot of capital going into it?
Oh, sure.
Is a lot of money going into blockchain-centric VC investments?
Oh, sure. Yes. I mean, without question. I would say there are a handful of products that are attracting the most amount of dollars, and that doesn't mean that they're going to raise. It's all oversubscribed, right? The best products in the world. Anchorage just did a round, right?
Yeah,
they were massively
huge round
and massively oversubscribed. It's because it's one of the most talented teams in that space. And we're not just talking crypto custody. Their technology is pervasive. So those are the types of companies where you're going to see people write big checks. And eventually in their B, C, and D will have to write much larger checks. And that's what, you have Paradigm and A16Z and a bunch of other folks who are raising hundreds of millions of dollars because they realize that the terminal value of these projects is enormous and they'll have to continue to finance them down the stream.
Mike, it's such a pleasure having you back on
Same
Cryptotrader.
here. Good to see you.
And raising money here on the ground are projects, still building through this market. An encouraging sign as the conference circuit continues and blockchain keeps growing.
So here is Spedin, which is built on Flexa. Can you give me a little bit of breakdown for those who don't know about it?
Sure. So Flexa is a new payment network that doesn't use Visa, MasterCard, any other existing sort of infrastructure. We go directly to the merchants that allow cryptocurrencies to be spendable at merchants now, instantly and with zero fees. It's live, it works, you can spend crypto for free, no fees, instantly at some national merchants.
So last month we celebrated our 5th anniversary and we launched the new Shapeshift. So the new Shapeshift is an easy-to-use platform that ties together all the products that Shapeshift's been building over the years. So the classic market exchange, the hardware wallet KeepKey, which we acquired in 2017, and CoinCap for price data.
BlockQuake is going to be a digital asset trading platform or a cryptocurrency exchange, and we are looking to onboard 6 fiats.
Cabin is in the business of verifying, managing, and monetizing identity. We have a KYC AML platform. We put someone through the process, and we put someone through that process just once because they get added to a global whitelist effectively.
GDA is a combination of MLG Blockchain, which is Canada's largest blockchain consultancy group, and Secure Digital Markets, we're Canada's largest brokerage and liquidity provider. We've essentially joined forces to take a new era of tokens to market.
To be able to take digital assets from their seed stage through to their liquidity event, all under one roof.
Our kind of official launch, because we did launch softly in April, but we wanted to have this period of time to really hone in and make sure this is smooth and seamless.
To wrap up is the legendary Techstars. We've covered the Alchemist Techstars blockchain accelerator before on the show, and they're currently baking rounds looking for their next roster of blockchain-based startups, starting right here at the Futurist. We continue our coverage of the Futurist conference here in Toronto, and as I look at my phone now, 775 points down on the Dow, Bitcoin down 8% for the day, and altcoins getting wrecked. In this market, is there more money going into blockchain? Yes, in this market, we see Bitcoin down, we're seeing altcoins down. Is money going into the venture capital side of things?
Well, Ron, definitely. We're here looking for those next companies with Techstars. We've just opened up applications for our next program. And in the VC game, we're in this game for 10 years. We're used to markets going up and down. We're used to seeing these types of things. We're not in it for the short term, and we're here to change the world through decentralized technologies, and these kind of movements is expected.
Are we saying that this bear market is actually only in the token world? In other words, this instrument called the token that people don't understand. And is there an undercurrent of, say, a bull market in the VC space when it comes to blockchain?
I think what we're seeing is that the market or the retail investor is saying, well, we haven't really seen a lot of applications that are really changing the world or living up to the promise that decentralized technology has been promoted by many of these projects. So that is being reflected in the price. But what we're seeing from, if you want to call it the smart money, are a number of funds that have been set up investing in really, really smart technology that we know is going to take 3 to 4 years to start seeing how it can impact the industries that they're going after.
So as a VC,
yeah,
are you looking at a 5 to 10 year time horizon? Are you saying to people, invest today for something that's only going to realize value in 5 to 10 years?
Exactly. I think if you look at the internet, let's use that as an example, the majority of the fiber was laid out probably 10 years before we started seeing any real major disruption. And it still took another 15 years to see the companies like Amazon, Google, Facebook that we have today. So these things take a long time to make a difference in the markets, but we're betting on that future and we're very patient with our capital.
So are we saying right now that there's a VC blockchain bull market going on while the tokens are in clearly a bear market?
Well, what I think you've seen is a lot of funds that have raised close to $1 billion that now need to deploy that capital. So from a VC side, they're seeing really interesting projects. They're not worried about the token economics today. The regulation is still being figured out, and the capital is very patient. So the investments are happening. There are great projects that are happening, and I think we're going to start seeing that reflected in the prices in the coming years.
Tell us about your next accelerator. I know you ran a very successful New York accelerator program. You've now got applications open for the next one. Tell us about how to apply, when to apply. Give us all the details.
Sure. So like you said, we had a great program that ended a few months back. We've had 10 successful companies all about to close their round, so it's extremely exciting for them. And our applications are open for the next batch. You can go to techstars.com, find the Alchemist Blockchain Techstars Accelerator and apply. Applications are open till mid-October.
And then lots of patient capital apparently waiting on the sidelines.
All right, thank you so much. We'll see you guys.
Question is, in this market, is there more money going into blockchain? Lots of patient capital waiting on the sidelines. So that's it for our coverage right here from the birthplace of Ethereum and some other big projects. The world markets are collapsing, the crypto markets are volatile, so if you are out there trading, trade well, my friends.
Cryptotrader is proudly brought to you by eToro. Discover a simpler way to trade and invest in cryptocurrencies and more.